An unlikely detective, how one Texas researcher is using maggots and flies to solve crimes. This is Unsolved. We are taking you today out of the evidence rooms and into a research lab on the Texas A&M campus. There, an expert is using entomology to unearth a potentially vital clue for criminal investigations. For more than 20 years, Dr. Jeff Tomberlin has examined the insect life cycle in order to estimate how long someone has been dead. According to the university, he's got as many as 200 cases under his belt, from serial killings to poaching cases that have taken him from Texas all the way across the world to places like Tanzania, Africa. Joining me now is a professor in the Department of Entomology at Texas A&M, sometimes known as the fly detective, Dr. Jeff Tomberlin. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go back to the beginning. Long before you became a leader and a pioneer in this field, you already had an interest in true crime. Where did that spark?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting from my perspective, at least, is I think the seeds were planted as a child growing up in rural South Georgia. I grew up in an agrarian environment, and I think I was exposed to the cycle of life. I mean, I had animals on the farm, and I saw animals reared, and I saw them die, and I think I was naturally drawn to this idea of what happens when death occurs, and that followed me all the way. That followed me to the University of Georgia, where I studied biology, and I happened to take an elective, and I learned about the field of forensic entomology, and that really opened some doors. What's interesting about that is I was definitely curious about the world of forensics, and so I actually got a job at a funeral home to see if I could handle being around death. And I did that as part of my undergraduate experience, and I realized I didn't have much of an aversion to it. And as the saying goes, the doors opened up and I took off from there.
You mentioned not having an aversion. This is definitely a really specific and at times, I'll use the word interesting career,
Sure.
I'm sure, and field to look into. It's not for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach, I think. How do you navigate some of those parts of your job and your research?
Yeah, it's a good point to make. You learn a lot about yourself when you're presented with some heinous crime where something terrible has happened to somebody. And I think, what I observed, at least in that experience, was you either have no problem with it, you either can work with it, but you don't want to see it, or you don't want to deal with it. And for me, I think a lot of it, again, is just I was raised on a farm, and I was exposed to, we had animals that we consumed, and we had to go through that process. So for me, the idea of death was not that much of a leap in terms of understanding what it is. From the forensic perspective, I don't think anybody really knows what they think of it until they see it. And for me, working at the funeral home was crucial because I got to see actual human death. Um, but for some reason, I just don't have much of an aversion to it. I, my response is pretty stable, regardless of what I'm seeing. And that's individual specific. That's really a hard question to answer. It's very much about the person that's pursuing it, I think.
I know the folks who have benefited from the breakthroughs that this kind of science and that your work has helped. We noted for our audience that you're solving cases, so I know they are grateful for the skill set that you have. But explain the basics for people. How do you use this kind of science to aid in criminal investigations?
Sure. So I'm an entomologist by training, so I study insects, and my research program is decomposition ecology. So how do things rot and how are nutrients cycled? So the more we understand about that process, and we gain precision in predicting outcomes or how things start, is really important. So when an individual dies, the remains become exposed to the environment, and that means there are organisms in the environment that will want to consume those remains. And what I'm really interested in is what drives the attraction and colonization of those bodies by insects. And if we can understand that process, then we can estimate how long the insects have been associated with the remains. which can be viewed in most cases as a minimum postmortem interval. So we just really try to help investigators get a greater appreciation of the decomposition process and how that information can really be important in deciphering what happened to them and who might be responsible for it.
Why is time of death so important? And how have you seen that play a key role in some of the investigations you've worked on?
Right. So, for us, we do time of colonization estimation. So, colonization by insects typically occurs after death. And if we have an idea of when insects are colonizing a body, and we call that a minimum postmortem interval, it kind of gives investigators a starting point of, okay, soon before this, this is when the remains became available, death may have been associated with it, or they were moved from one location to another. So it's really an ecological assessment of this process. And it gives investigators some information that could lead to identifying people that are responsible for the crime because you're looking for when it happened and where it happened and who might have been affiliated with it. So the information we provided is circumstantial in terms of general ideas of what may have taken place.
So, explain the process for people of how you get tapped to work on a case. How are these law enforcement and investigatory agencies finding you?
I would say it's probably through multiple channels. One, probably word of mouth. I've worked with a lot of people over the course of the past 30 years. Secondly, I'm board certified as a forensic entomologist. I'm one of maybe 20 some odd individuals in North America that hold those credentials. So I'm affiliated with a website. So if someone's looking for entomology experts, I'm one of the people listed. And I think probably a third is through workshops that we conduct. So we train law enforcement across the United States on how to identify, collect, and preserve, ship entomological evidence. So we've done workshops for the FBI or for OCIS or NCIS, et cetera. So we work with law enforcement quite a bit.
We've noted for our audience that you have worked on as many as 200 cases, and some of those are pretty crazy ones. As you look back over your career, are there cases or a case that stands out to you the most that you can talk about?
Well, they're all unique. Unfortunately, a lot of them have unfortunate circumstances associated with them. Yeah, I think one of the most amazing cases that I worked with was where a set of remains was buried under cement, about 2 feet, and insects were still able to locate and colonize the body. So it just shows you how tenacious insects can be in terms of locating those resources. So even 2 feet under cement, insects were still able to find it and colonize it.
Really incredible. We know you have not only worked on, heartbreaking homicide investigations, as you mentioned. We are told by the university that you even worked on a poaching cases that have taken you international. Can you talk about that and some of the other ways that this science is able to, bring answers to folks who need them, even outside of just a homicide investigation?
Of course. So if we think about wildlife forensics, poaching, as you mentioned, is really important. Cases that involve grizzly bear poaching in Montana. It could be vulture poaching in Tanzania. Uh, Many opportunities come to us involving other vertebrates besides humans. So wildlife is one example, but also domestic cases. So it could be abuse and neglect of canines or cats and other pets. So we have done a fair amount of work there. As far as international work, I mentioned like Tanzania, but we've also done work in Japan, Mexico, et cetera.
Fascinating. I think the coolest part that I came across in my reading is that you're opening up this world of this science and this field to students every day on the Texas A&M campus. So what has that been like? What kind of relationships have you formed? And then what do you hear from the students who are learning about this field?
It's been extraordinary. I think since we created this program in forensic science back in 2007, it's grown, I won't say exponentially, but it's grown quite a bit. It's well over 500 students now. And in 2019, it was ranked as the top program in the country. Um, what I find extraordinary about what we do is it serves as a platform to introduce STEM to students. It's a great way to get students engaged in terms of what STEM work is, so science, math, technology, et cetera. And I think that opens up doors. And I think the skill set that they learned through the forensic science program, even associated with forensic entomology, is a demonstration of the value of critical thinking and observation. And that's a set of skills that can translate across disciplines. And what I always say, it's applicable from the courtroom to the boardroom. You learn how to be a critical thinker and keen to observation of what data are telling you. You can be a success in a multitude of disciplines.
We mentioned launching this program. You said, talk about what the evolution of that has looked like. You said it's grown now, an incredible, hundreds of students. But what has that looked like, and why has that been so important to have a place like this on the Texas A&M campus? And I think in so many ways serving so many Texans and people across the world, it sounds like, with this science.
Sure. When you look at accredited programs in the forensic sciences, prior to this program, the nearest one was in Mississippi at the undergraduate level. So the state of Texas was sorely needing expertise in this area. And considering the size of the state, the border with Mexico, et cetera, the ports, the amount of commodities that come through our ports and Port Authority, I think it's important to recognize that quality assurance, adulteration, other aspects of forensics investigation are at play here. So we talk about traditional forensics, we could say chemistry, genetics, et cetera. But again, creating a platform for students to be educated in forensic sciences and then applying them to protect our borders and the security of our food systems, et cetera, is going to be extremely critical. And when we think about forensics, that's relevant to agriculture and it's relevant to engineering. So the cities that we live in, the businesses that are here, the food that we produce, we need to have the forensic sciences in place to make sure that the material we consume and utilize is safe. So I would say it was a response to what was needed. And I think the reason the program's growing so well is because of the resources invested by the university to allow it to be successful, ranging from faculty to facilities and other infrastructure. I think we're just getting started. I think the program's still evolving and new opportunities are being presented every day in terms of where forensic science is applicable.
You've talked about this just a bit there, where you see this going in the future, but what can people expect out of this field as it develops? Is there anything, any direction that you didn't touch on that you'd like to explore yourself?
Yes, I think as we continue to explore opportunities to venture out into other parts of the solar system, I think we have to think about forensic science as related to that. We have to think about economies that are developing around space exploration, et cetera. And I think forensic science will be a big player in that space.
I want to get back to the work you are doing. On our show here, Unsolved, we often profile unsolved or cold cases. And something we often ask those detectives is, what is the biggest barrier in this case? Or what would it take to get a case solved? And I'm curious, what are some common barriers you run into? I assume that the science isn't always foolproof in helping get the outcome that you're seeking.
Sure. I think first and foremost is communication. So developing relationships with law enforcement, creating a network of communication so that data can flow freely between individuals. We know what we can do, investigators know what they can do, but sometimes we operate in silos. So breaking down those silos so that we create that network across the state to expedite addressing these questions related to investigations where nothing is delayed. I think that's really critical.
You are working so closely with the law enforcement, as you said. There's still ways to bridge those relationships. Do you, in your work, ever get a chance to connect with the families of the victims? Is that ever a part of your role? And if so, what kind of impact does that have on the work you do?
So typically I do not. I work directly either with attorneys or with law enforcement. So I'm working with them and they serve as a mediator between me and the defendant or the victim or associated families. So I rarely engage that side of the investigation. I'm really restricted to interpreting evidence, testifying in court, et cetera.
I imagine, though, you are knee deep in that evidence. Is there anything that about the process or about the investigations that just really make the job worth continuing to do? What is it that keeps you going, I guess I'm asking?
I think any time where I can provide insights to what may have occurred in a crime, I feel a sense of accomplishment. I feel like I'm giving back because when we think about investigations, it's not just about the individual that may have died. It's about the communities. It's about the families. And if what I do brings closure to all parties involved, then to me that's a success.
Mm. Well, we thank you for your work and the steps that your field has taken. Thanks to you and your just incredible creativity, and it sounds like dogged work in the field, and also shaping the future of this industry with the students that you teach. Is there anything else you want our audience to know about the program or yourself before we let you go here today?
Well, I just want to say I believe it's been a great investment by the taxpayers of the state. I think the forensic science program is robust, it's growing, it's having an impact not just in Texas, but throughout the United States. People from all over the country come to school here for this program. And it's because of the commitment of the university to what it can be and what it's becoming. It's exciting. I'm grateful to be part of it. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
We look forward to watching you all in the future and the work that you do. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Join us next week on KXAN Plus for another episode of Unsolved Central Texas. New episodes air every Thursday at 1. And watch any episode anytime. Just go to KXAN.com or look for the KXAN Plus Originals category on our streaming app. We'll see you next week.